as it is often taught, tells us that Africans arrived in the Americas only as enslaved people during the transatlantic slave trade. This version of history, however, is incomplete. A growing body of evidence suggests that black people were present in the Americas thousands of years before Christopher Columbus set foot in the New World. The idea that ancient African navigators, traders, and settlers reached the Americas long before European explorers challenges deeply ingrained historical narratives, raising new questions about the cultural exchanges that shaped early American civilizations. The presence of black people in pre-Columbian America is not just a matter of speculation. It is supported by a variety of historical, archaeological, linguistic, and genetic evidence. Ancient African mariners are believed to have traveled across the Atlantic Ocean, establishing contacts with indigenous American societies. These early voyages were not isolated incidents, but part of a broader tradition of African exploration and trade. This article explores the compelling evidence that points to early African presence in the Americas, the influence of African cultural and technological contributions on indigenous civilizations, and the systematic suppression of this history by colonial powers. By examining these historical connections, we gain a deeper understanding of the complexity and diversity of human migration and interaction long before European conquest reshaped the world. One of the most significant pieces of evidence supporting the presence of black people in the Americas before Columbus is the seafaring capabilities of ancient African civilizations. Long before European maritime exploration, African cultures had developed advanced shipbuilding techniques and navigational knowledge that enabled them to undertake long-distance voyages across the ocean. The ancient Egyptians, Carthaginians, and Malians are among the African civilizations believed to have had the capacity for transatlantic travel. The maritime achievements of ancient Egyptians are well documented. Egyptian reliefs and murals depict large, seafaring vessels capable of long voyages. Inscriptions from the time of Pharaoh Necho, circa 600 BCE, describe an African circumnavigation of the continent, suggesting that Egyptian and Nubian mariners were already exploring distant regions. Some scholars believe that Egyptian explorers may have reached the Americas, bringing their knowledge and culture with them. In addition to the Egyptians, the Carthaginians, descendants of the Phoenicians, were known for their exceptional navigational skills. They established extensive trade networks across the Mediterranean and beyond, and there is evidence suggesting that they may have ventured as far as the Americas. Carthaginian coins and artifacts have been found in regions of South America, further supporting the possibility of pre-Columbian African contact. Perhaps the most well-documented case of an African expedition to the Americas comes from the Mali Empire. In the 14th century, Mali's ruler, Mansa Abubakari II, is said to have launched an ambitious voyage across the Atlantic with a fleet of 2,000 ships. While mainstream history dismisses this voyage as a legend, historical records from Arab scholars such as Al-Amari describe Abubakari's departure and his abdication of the throne in pursuit of new lands. The striking similarities between West African and Mesoamerican cultural elements suggest that his expedition may have reached the Americas and left a lasting impact on indigenous societies. Archaeological discoveries across the Americas provide compelling evidence of early African contact. One of the most significant findings is the presence of large, carved stone heads in the ancient Olmec civilization of Mesoamerica. The Olmec civilization, which flourished in present-day Mexico around 1200 BCE, left behind massive stone sculptures depicting individuals with distinctively African features, including broad noses, full lips, and tightly coiled hair. These sculptures have led many researchers to believe that the Olmecs had interactions with African visitors or settlers. Beyond the Olmec heads, other artifacts point to early African influence in the Americas. African-style cotton, gourds, and linguistic similarities between certain African and indigenous American languages further support this theory. The presence of African DNA markers in some indigenous American populations also suggests intermingling between African and native peoples long before European contact. Additionally, similarities between African and American agricultural practices, such as the construction of earth mounds, indicate possible transatlantic exchanges. Both West African and Mesoamerican civilizations built large ceremonial mounds for religious and social purposes, a shared practice that suggests a connection between the two cultures. This connection challenges the conventional narrative that such developments occurred in isolation. Despite the compelling evidence of African presence in the Americas before Columbus, this history has been systematically suppressed. European colonial powers sought to control historical narratives to justify their conquests and establish racial hierarchies that placed Africans and indigenous peoples at the bottom. Recognizing that Africans had been global explorers and contributors to ancient civilizations would have challenged the Eurocentric worldview that portrayed Africans as primitive and incapable of advanced achievements. During the colonial period, European historians dismissed or actively suppressed accounts of African voyages to the Americas. Early European explorers, including Columbus himself, documented encounters with dark-skinned indigenous peoples in the Caribbean and South America. Yet these accounts were largely ignored or reinterpreted to fit colonial narratives. Spanish chroniclers such as Bartolomé de las Casas noted that some native peoples described encounters with African traders, but these records were not given serious consideration by mainstream historians. Additionally, the transatlantic slave trade played a significant role in erasing African contributions to American history. The forced migration of millions of Africans to the Americas created a narrative that framed Africans solely as enslaved laborers rather than as explorers, traders, or contributors to early American civilizations. This narrative continues to shape mainstream historical perspectives today. The history of Black people in America long before Columbus is a story of exploration, cultural exchange, and resilience. From the advanced seafaring capabilities of ancient African civilizations to the archaeological and linguistic evidence of African influence in the Americas, the case for pre-Columbian African contact is strong. However, the systematic suppression of this history has led to widespread ignorance of these early connections. By reclaiming and acknowledging this hidden history, we gain a more accurate understanding of the complexity of human migration and cultural interaction. The story of Black people in the Americas before Columbus is not just an alternative historical perspective. It is an essential part of the global human story, one that deserves recognition and further exploration.